Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rogers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rogers scores! Ball is batted and gone.
Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks.
Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick lays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
There we go. Welcome in, everybody, to Gamecock Pod Live for June the 5th, episode number 1500. And we have got a great show on tap today. In just a few minutes, we'll be joined by Alex Jones of thebigspur.com to talk Gamecock Football Recruiting. Then we'll be joined by my good friend Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, who will be going for his third Sports Emmy win this weekend when the winners will be revealed. So it should be a great show. Obviously, there's a Gamecock coaching search going on. Everybody wants to know who the next men's golf coach is going to be. I'm just kidding. Certainly we'll get to that with Mike, but let's start off by jumping right into our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines. Also, go ahead and jump into our Nana's Porch chat box with Craig, who's fired up and ready to go. Leave your questions, your comments. We'll get to them. We'll read them. Just keep the profanity to a minimum. All right, and so here we go with our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, Rock Hill, Fort Mill, Lancaster area, Nana's Porch. They should be your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or the big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue. Nana's Porch has got you covered. If you have an event that requires a food trailer, go with Nana's Porch, voted among the top 3 food trailers in Charlotte by the local newspaper poll. And as we all know, the award-winning pimento cheese voted both number 1 and number 2 in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. You can't go wrong with Nana's Porch. So I strongly urge you to support this Gamecock-owned and operated business by going to nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Tell them Keith Alsep sent you. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. You'll love it. I guarantee it. All right. Camden's Joyce Edwards today was named for the second consecutive year as the Max Preps National Female Athlete of the Year. She is a three-sport star who joins Olympian Missy Franklin and WNBA star Alyssa Peely as the only 2-time honorees. Of course, Edwards, considered by many the number one prospect in basketball for the class of 2024. She is working with Team USA right now, about to participate in the AmeriCup with the U.S. basketball 18 and under team. But she's also a sensational volleyball player and soccer player. She's earned countless accolades, including McDonald's All-American, being the Nike Hoop Summit, being All-State, winning championships across all sports. And so Joyce Edwards caps her 4-year career at Camden by being the Max Preps Female National Athlete of the Year for the second time. Dawn Staley said, and I quote, "She's destined for greatness in anything she does. It won't be enough for her to check off basketball accolades. We'll have our hands full in helping her fulfill all the things she wants to do in life." So congratulations to Joyce Edwards. It would not surprise me if she's not the Gatorade Circle of Champions National Female Athlete of the Year either. All right, yesterday, Gamecock women's basketball made the top 6 for the number 3 player in the class of 2025 in 6'1" guard Jasmine Jazzy Davidson out of Oregon. South Carolina, Duke, Texas, TCU, who hired the recruiting coordinator from Oregon as their head coach. And then you have UCLA and Southern Cal. She's probably the most elite scorer in the class of 2025. I've got a list of Gamecock women's basketball prospects for the 2025 class we'll get to a little bit later. All right, Vanderbilt baseball commit Luke Raup of North Myrtle Beach, 6'5", 205. He's the number 2 prospect in South Carolina for the class of 2025. He's a right-handed pitcher, a first baseman, and a third baseman. He flipped his commitment from Vanderbilt to South Carolina today. That's the second commitment South Carolina's gotten since Mark Kingston was let go on Monday. The other is a transfer portal pitcher from Winthrop. All right, the NCAA Outdoor Track Championships begin today in Eugene, Oregon. 13 Gamecock athletes will compete in 13 events, including Nicholas Harbor, who's trying to make the Olympic team. He will compete tonight in the 100-meter and 200-meter preliminaries. He's already an Olympic qualifier in the 200 meters as he ran in the East Regionals a time of 20.20. The automatic qualifier time was 20.30. He's got to still improve in the 100 meters. He ran 10.11. 10.05 is the automatic qualifier time. There'll also be 5 true freshman Gamecock women competing, including Zaya Akins in the 400-meter, the 4x100, and the 4x400. Jamesia Ford, who may be the best athlete on campus, she'll be competing in the 200, the 4x100, and the 4x400, and several others as well. One name to mention on the men's side that will be competing is Channing Ferguson. He will be competing for the finals in both the long jump and the high jump. And so we'll see what happens there. All right. Shane Beamer's second summer camp will be coming up this week, and the second big official visit weekend is set for this weekend, and that's why we're getting ready to bring in for the first time, making his debut, is Alex Jones, not of InfoWars. We would not have him on our show. But last night I was watching the late night Gamecock show with Matt Anderson and John Whittle, and they call him the pretty face. And so we welcome in the pretty face of Gamecock sports and the Big Spur, Alex Jones. Alex, how's it going today, my man?
It's going great. I appreciate you having me, and I'm excited to make my debut on your show.
Well, we're excited for you to make your debut as well. And so I have to say there was a lot of conversation last night about the who's going to be the next men's golf coach at South Carolina. No, I'm just kidding. I think everybody, the conversation was a lot about baseball. And so a couple more news notes. South Carolina may not be the only SEC job that opens up. There's rumors swirling that Auburn coach Butch Thompson could go up into administration. Tim Corbin is considering hanging it up. Their built-in advantage they had is disappearing. And David Pierce at Texas, look, you think South Carolina has high expectations. At Texas, you better be getting there every year, and you better be winning it. And he's not done that. He's 62 years old. There's speculation he could be replaced or stepped down. And so certainly there's got to be a sense of urgency if you're South Carolina. And so, Alex, I want to get your opinion on this. The message board mobs are all out in force today, right?
Right.
They're all doom and gloom. The rumors abound. Cliff Godwin's turned down South Carolina, and it's going to be Monty Lee, and the stands will be empty. I just don't believe for a second Cliff Godwin's turned down South Carolina yet, because if he had, I think there would be some legitimate journalistic reporting on that. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think with him, with Cliff Godwin, it's just how does he want to stay at ECU? Obviously, it's out there. Obviously, everybody knows that he's, big ECU guy, alumni. He wants to help get them to Omaha. Been there for years, and they've gotten close, just haven't quite gotten over that hump there in Greenville. So I think it's going to be interesting to see here these next couple of days where that coaching search goes kind of with him. And then you still got Monty, and who knows if there's anybody else that pops up. But, I think those are a few interesting names to watch there.
I mean, Dan McDonnell has been rumored. He's a guy that's been to Omaha 5 times. I'll get into this later with Mike Uva as well. But, the perception seems to be that he's kind of the Dabo Sweeney of the transfer portal era. They've not fared well. Since COVID, they missed the NCAA tournament through the past 4 years. Certainly, he hadn't forgotten how to coach baseball. Maybe he needs a change of scenery, but unless he's going to embrace the transfer portal and NIL, I just don't think he's the right fit either.
Yeah, and from his – you're right on his coaching abilities. Like, the guy obviously knows how to coach baseball and has gotten Louisville to big places in baseball. And if all that's kind of true about the NIL and transfer portal, like in this day and age, especially in the SEC, it's going to be hard to keep up with all the other big schools. So, I mean, if that is the case, then I can see that being a problem. But from a coaching standpoint, I mean, if that's where this one goes, like just from an on-field standpoint, that'd be a great hire.
No doubt. So you hear Chris Pollard, you hear Coach Walter at Wake Forest potentially I don't know if Walter will leave. That Pollard just got a new contract. The buyout could be prohibitive there. I mean, honestly, after Cliff Godwin and Monty Lee, kind of like John Whittle said last night, I don't know who's in between them.
Right.
But basically, all the names that we've heard, everybody's available to interview. And maybe Cliff Godwin does need a few days to process, getting bounced out of his own regional. But I think he's got to look at the future of college athletics and the changing landscape. And East Carolina is in the AAC, the American Athletic Conference, but in a couple years, Alex, that's probably going to be a group of 5 league because of this new settlement where every school is going to have to, if they want to be a part of big boy sports, they're going to have to kick in $20 million a year and have money for NIL and transfer portal and scholarships. And I just don't think East Carolina will have the resources to be able to survive in that type of landscape. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think when you think about that, is another part of that is just players could start just getting plucked from all those little schools. All your best players could then get signed or transferred to all these bigger schools. So I think down the road, I mean, that's kind of already a problem. Maybe not so much at ECU just because they're one of the top tier programs, but I think moving forward, that could become a bigger issue, and just all these bigger schools are getting those bigger names. So I think that's got to be one thing that's looked at.
No doubt about it. So let's dive into some Gamecock football. We call it here the Summer of Shane. And it's that time of year. Last Friday, you had the first camp session of the year, and certainly Jaquel Hallman from Blackville Hilda did not disappoint. He got his offer, measured 6'1.5", 198, ran a 4.43 40, a 4.28 shuttle, and over 9 feet 3 inches in the standing broad jump. A big time athlete. Alex, what are your thoughts on Jaquel Hallman from Blackville Hilda?
Yeah, going into that camp, he was a guy that we kind of looked at as said, if the testing numbers all work out, the staff likes what they see, like there's a pretty good chance they're going to pull the trigger on an offer. And he didn't disappoint at that camp. Just from a testing standpoint, he looked awesome. Just physically, when you looked at him, you're like, that guy looks very, very good. And then you watched him do some drills, kind of in the the one-on-one drills that they did. At one point, I was over kind of keeping an eye on him, and I saw him and Clayton White getting some one-on-one work, and normally that's a pretty good indication that things are going well. And so I think that once they got him in those one-on-one stuff, Torian Gray, Clayton White, all those guys kept an eye on him, and he definitely impressed. And he's going to be one to keep an eye on in that recruitment now that he's got the offer.
I completely agree. All right, so let's look back on last week's official visit list. I mean, I kind of got a different, tiers of guys. I think certainly the top 2 ranked guys, you come out of this visit weekend feeling really good about 5-star Alabaster defensive end Jared Smith and 4-star offensive lineman Jalen Gilchrist from Virginia Beach, Virginia, who I still think could be a tackle. He's on his profile, it says 6'4", 290. Other people think he's 6'5", 315. I don't really know what he was measured at, but you had those 2 guys, and then I would put the third really elite guy in the category of as being Malik Clark, because this is a very important recruitment. I didn't think there could be a wide receivers coach that could do a worse job of recruiting players than Brian McClendon, and then Justin Stepp proved me wrong. And he did a nice job developing some of the guys Brian McClendon and Will Muschamp brought in, but not really any of his guys. And so you've got an elite wide receiver, 6'2", 185 from Rock Hill, a Gamecock stronghold, 10.55 in the 100 meters. North Carolina is a big factor. I think NC State will be a bigger factor after that visit because of their NIL collected, and he's going to take a visit to Florida State. Some, including the Big Spur, J.C. Sherbert, thinks Malik Clark may be the most important recruit in this cycle for the Gamecocks. How do you feel about that? And would you put Malik Clark in that elite tier with Jared Smith and Jalen Gilchrist?
Yeah, with Malik, the first time I got to see him in person was either last week or 2 weeks ago. They did like a Football City USA showcase in Rock Hill, and I went up there and saw Rock Hill and all those guys practice. And while I was there, Mike Furry and Dowell Loggins were there keeping a very close eye on him. And just from watching him, he's obviously very, very talented. He's pretty polished wide receiver, really good hands. He's fast. They also got Jake Bentley on the staff now. They're coaching quarterback, so that could be a little bit of a help. And yeah, I think going back to your comment about how important he is, I think they showed him on this official visit just how important he is, telling him, you're a top of the board guy for us. I think as far as schools wise, I think it's right now it's South Carolina, North Carolina. I think you're going to probably throw NC State in there with that visit. Yeah, I don't think you can count out Florida State just because of their success and stuff, but in my opinion, at the end of the day, I think this is probably going to be a 3-team race. And I think right now South Carolina is right there. I mean, kind of like I said, they showed this weekend just how important he is to them.
Yeah, look, there's not really any established wide receivers on this roster, and I've been covering this a long time, and when you have a coaching change and you have a position coaching change, that guy usually, unless he's got a lot of great players, he wants to get his own guys in there. And I think this would be a marquee type of recruit for Mike Furry. And I'm not taking anything away from Brian Rowe, who I think is an excellent pickup out of Concord, North Carolina. And so does Malik Clark have a scheduled commitment date? Is it going to be sometime in July? When do you think it could go down?
Yeah, I think you're going to see him kind of finish out all these visits. I could see this being a late summer. I'm trying to remember if he this weekend said if there was going to be a commitment date. Yeah, he said a commitment will be made at some point middle of July. So that's kind of adds up with kind of finishing up those visits. So, just going to have to kind of follow the visits, see where South Carolina stands post all these NC State, North Carolina visits, because I think he's at North Carolina this weekend. But, South Carolina definitely is right there. I'm not maybe too early to say right at the top, but they're right there in this recruitment.
I think the longer it would go, maybe it could be better for South Carolina. You want to get him back on campus in July for that cookout.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. All right, so what are your thoughts on Jared Smith? Obviously, he's visiting Georgia this weekend. It seems like Georgia, they want every defensive lineman in the South, and they sign just about all of them every year.
Yeah, Jared Smith's a guy, just another guy that Sterling Lucas has, another edge guy that Sterling Lucas has South Carolina in for. That's an out-of-state, high-profile, highly ranked recruit. You think back to Deju a couple cycles ago. You think back to, obviously, Dylan Stewart, how they got all those guys out of DMV. But now he's got him in Alabaster, Alabama, right in the thick of it for a highly recruited edge. So with him, I think South Carolina is – they're once again, they're another one of these guys, another one of these teams that are right up there in his recruitment with them. And as you kind of mentioned, like he still has visits to go. and he's another guy who can go anywhere really in the country. But I think he connects really well, just like all the recruits have with Sterling Lucas, and I think that's going to be a key point in this recruitment going forward.
And I don't think it hurt that Dylan Stewart was his host.
Yeah.
Over the weekend. I heard things went very well, and I think Cam Pringle hosted Jalen Gilchrist, a 6'5", 315 from Salem High School in Virginia Beach. He's a top 100 player, a guy I saw on the sidelines last year at the Kentucky game. An impressive physical specimen. Seems like the Gamecocks have been in pole position for a while and are still in pole position for Jalen Gilchrist.
Yeah, I agree. And I know Hale added in a crystal ball this weekend for Jalen Gilchrist. Another one of these Virginia guys who Beamer and the staff have really made great inroads there. Obviously, Shane already has his inroads there, but just another guy who I think they came into this visit probably at the top of this recruitment, and nothing with that change. And it make you even say that they kind of grew their lead a little bit here in this recruitment.
All right, so a guy I really like they offered back in the springtime is 3-star Snellville, Georgia linebacker Jaden Breaker, about 6'3", 215, long, rangy, athletic. Kind of reminds me of Wendell Gregory. I think he could play linebacker or he could be an edge guy. It could go either way. I think he's, could fit very well in that hybrid or flex defense that Clayton White is running. He's gotten some crystal ball picks as well. What do you think about Jaden Breaker?
Yeah, and I was interested to see, kind of talking to him after that visit, where they kind of talked to him about where he'd play if he were to sign with South Carolina. He mentioned that Sam position was the spot that they kind of like him in, and kind of showed him on film how they would be able to use him at that spot. Yeah, I think South Carolina's at a pretty good spot here. As you mentioned, he's got a crystal ball now, and he mentioned that, South Carolina's definitely up there in that recruitment. I think he's thinking about a commitment time sometime in the summer too, just kind of like a lot of these guys. So I think, and he's got some visits. I think he's going to Rutgers this weekend, along with Tayshawn Alston, who's also going to Rutgers. He's got NC State and Kentucky, I think, to wrap up. And then he wants to make that commitment sometime in July. So when you kind of look at it, South Carolina could have some pretty good momentum here if they can close on some of these recruits in July. But kind of sticking with Breaker, he's a pretty impressive looking linebacker, pretty impressive looking prospect. I think he's a guy who, going forward, South Carolina's going to be right there, and right now look to be in pretty good position.
All right, so you mentioned Tayshawn Alston, 6'3", measured in at 234 from Henderson, North Carolina, a guy South Carolina's been in good shape with, I think, for a long time. But, North Carolina is there as well. Coming out of the visit, and he's another very impressive guy on film, and I think this is going to be a big year because of the number of guys South Carolina is going to lose out of that edge room and out of the linebacker room. What do you think about Tayshawn Alston coming out of the visit?
Yeah, it sounded like, talking to him about his visit, like his player host was Debo Williams, so I think it's a pretty good host to have if you're a linebacker kind of recruit coming to South Carolina. But he's another guy. You mentioned North Carolina. I think this is kind of a North Carolina South Carolina battle right now. He's, like we've just been mentioning with these last couple of guys, another guy who's thinking about committing that July, August. He mentioned a date's not quite set yet, but he's got that North Carolina visit here coming up. Or excuse me, he's got he'll head to Chapel Hill next weekend, and he's got Virginia Tech too on a visit for June 21st. So I think after that, he's going to kind of sit down, think about all the visits, because he's got Rutgers this weekend along with Jaden Breaker. But I think South Carolina's in a decent spot here, and we'll just see kind of what that North Carolina visit does here. But I think they're looking pretty good right now.
All right, I think it'd be really important for South Carolina to break through back into North Carolina and be able to get 2 or 3 guys out of the Tar Heel State. All right, so Irmo athlete AJ Brand, South Carolina pretty much really likes him as a defensive player. He's a high school quarterback from Irmo, former teammate of Nick Eamon-Warry.
Mm-hmm.
Also the preferred walk-on DB, who I think was his host, who enrolled early at South Carolina. I mean, is it really, am I going to stay home and play at South Carolina, or do I want to go somewhere where I can be a quarterback? How do you break down the recruitment of A.J. Brand?
Yeah, I think you kind of mentioned that decision he's going to have to make it because, Virginia Tech's recruiting him as a quarterback. He's also got a potential Oregon State visit that I don't know has been locked down yet, but he's thinking about going there. The big question with him is, like, does he want to stick at quarterback that he plays at Irmo High School, or does he want to kind of be what the South Carolina staff is kind of recruiting him as a defensive athlete, safety type? So I think that's just when he talks about it, he's kind of open to whatever. I think there's still some a little bit of him wanting to play quarterback, but he kind of mentioned he's like, I want to go where I'm comfortable and all that. So when you hear that, I think you kind of like South Carolina's chances because he's not, 15, 20 minutes down the road from the school. So I think South Carolina's in a good spot, but we'll just see what comes down to that decision about what side of the ball he wants to play on.
So how big of a threat is Virginia Tech with him? Because I know they have been recruiting him as a quarterback.
Yeah, I think right now it's a South Carolina Virginia Tech battle, and that just him with that quarterback, them recruiting him as a quarterback. And like you mentioned, they've been there for a little while in this recruitment. So I think Oregon State just offered him just a couple weeks ago. So Virginia Tech, South Carolina seem like the top two right here.
Yeah, I don't know about playing quarterback in the Mountain West because that's what it's going to be. All right. All right, so let's talk about a couple of other offensive linemen who were interior guys.
Mm-hmm.
So internally, it seems like there is confidence for South Carolina with Isaac Spike Souls, who's from Louisville, male, 6'2", 295, a guy Lonnie Teasley's really zeroed in on as a true setter. They're crystal ball picks for NC State. Obviously, he's going to visit there. I think he's going to visit Kentucky and Louisville. What's the draw for South Carolina, and how do they stand coming out of his official visit?
Yeah, South Carolina's been recruiting him pretty hard for a good long while now, and I think that kind of resonates with him and his family. It sounds like he enjoyed his time here, got to spend time with Josiah Thompson, Blake Franks, and some of those freshman offensive linemen who it sounds like kind of talked to him about why they chose South Carolina and all that. And I know you mentioned it, and I know Hale's mentioned it in one of his pieces on Monday that it seems like NC State is probably the primary competition here. I think he's got Kentucky this weekend, so they're going to have some pull there too because he's a Louisville guy. But I think coming down to this is going to be those two, and just looking at him physically, I saw him at the spring game, and then he just physically he looks the part. One of these guys that Lonnie Teasley's been recruiting. So just watching these visits here, and I think he has a commitment date set. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but this is just another one of these offensive linemen who Lonnie Teasley's done a pretty good job recruiting so far.
All right, so then kind of a guy that just popped up. He had set a top 3 and a commitment date, and South Carolina wasn't in it. And then all of a sudden, Dontrell Glover, 6'2", 315 from Langston Hughes High School in Fairburn, Georgia, one of the top interior linemen in the country. He visited South Carolina last week. I think certainly South Carolina's probably playing catch up with him, but what are your thoughts coming out of that official visit?
Yeah, I kind of agree with all your points there. This one kind of came out of the blue with him official visiting South Carolina. He had a top 9, I think, and South Carolina was not included in it. But then he mentioned that Sean Elliott came by his school and said, you could potentially be a day 1 starter here. And he decides, okay, I'll go check out South Carolina. Now they're in his top 4. I think, just in my opinion, like you mentioned, there's still some ground to make up here in this recruitment. And he's got, just 3 schools who are really been recruiting him and kind of been in this recruitment longer than South Carolina's been. So not saying South Carolina's out of it, but I think there's still some work to be done there.
I would agree. All right, so how about running back Jeff Overton? Marquell Blackwell made the offer. His dad is one of his high school coaches at 5'10 and a half, 187 from Northeast Virginia, Quantico, home of the FBI headquarters. He's the only running back right now that has an official visit set with South Carolina. How do you kind of handicap that? I know there are other guys that have been offered, including my favorite guy, Jaden Jackson from out here in Franklin, Texas. What are your thoughts on Jeff Overton?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see here in these next 2 weekends of official visits if there's a running back that pops up here on the schedule because, as you mentioned, he's the only one that's on the docket or was on the docket for an official visit. He's a guy, one of these Virginia guys, again, who they've built inroads there. And I think with him, you got to watch those in-state schools, Virginia Tech. I think they're kind of that top competition with him right now. Just as a prospect, I like him. I kind of like what I see. And kind of sticking with that, how he's the only one visiting right now. I think South Carolina kind of likes where they are position-wise there when you look at what the team is because you got Rocket Sanders, who he's a one-and-done guy, but then you got guys like Oscar Adaway, Jawarn Howell, who's got he's obviously a freshman, and then you got the guys like Matthew Fuller, Dante Bradwell, like those guys. So it'll be interesting to see what the numbers look like here coming in this class for the running back, and it may end up being they take one, and Jeff Overton may be that guy.
Could be. All right, so some guys I didn't really mention. Cortez Smith, I think he's probably going to Georgia. Winston Watkins, not 5'10", 170. I don't know what he measured, probably around 5'8 and a half, 160 something. I don't know. And then Jadon Blair from Winston-Salem. It seems like Notre Dame and Penn State have been leading that recruitment. I mean, how far off base am I on those 3 guys?
I think you're pretty, in my opinion, on point. Kind of with Cortez Smith, I was going to say Georgia seems like the big-time player with him in that recruitment. I think he enjoyed his weekend here, but I think there's kind of sticking with him and Dontrell Glover. I think there's still some ground to make up there. With Jadon Blair, I think he goes to Notre Dame this weekend, so it'd be kind of interesting to see if maybe he locks it down after this one, but I think Notre Dame's the player there. So, yeah, with those 3 guys, and Winston Watkins, I'm not sure how much there's going to be much involvement there with South Carolina going forward. So, yeah, I think you're pretty on point with those 3 guys.
All right, good stuff. All right, so let's look ahead to this weekend. And, again, I've kind of got some tiers of guys, not just necessarily going according to their ranking. So, Jonte Gilbert, one of the most interesting recruits of the last couple of years. He was an early commit to Ohio State. He was a 5-star guy. Now you look at his list, it's not Ohio State, Georgia, Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina, Alabama, Auburn kind of list, but he's still ranked as a 4-star corner. His ranking is held pretty solid, 6'1", 185. Torian Gray has been recruiting this guy for a long time. He's making his visit to South Carolina this weekend. I mean, I think I'm putting him on commitment watch. What are your thoughts on Jonte Gilbert?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with all those points there. His recruitment has been interesting. And when you think about it, South Carolina's been there from the start, it seems like. From when he decommitted from Ohio State, it seems like South Carolina was a serious player there, and they still are. Then it kind of seemed like Clemson had some momentum in this recruitment, and now they're not in his final schools list. So he's one of these guys coming up this weekend that kind of have my eye on to see where exactly things stand moving after this weekend.
All right, so another guy I'm really intrigued by, former teammate of Dylan Stewart at Friendship Collegiate Academy in Washington, D.C., big defensive tackle Bryce Jenkins. Some people like him as an offensive lineman. Some people like him as a defensive lineman. This reminds me of the big guy in Charlotte that wound up going to Georgia, and everybody thought he might be an offensive tackle. I think Jordan Davis. But Bryce Jenkins, 6'5", 315, out of Washington, D.C. I mean, I'd have to think, that Travian Robertson, they need all the big-time defensive tackles they can get, and this is a guy South Carolina is in on. What are your thoughts on Bryce Jenkins?
Yeah, he's one who it looked like he was going to be taking an official visit that third weekend in June, but now it's gotten moved up to this weekend. 4-star guys, you mentioned out of Washington, D.C. I think composite rankings on 24/7 have him number 225 overall. Coming off a Rutgers visit, he's still got Maryland and Tennessee. So with him, I think the key is I think he's got a pretty good relationship with Travian Robinson and those guys. So he could be a guy to keep an eye on here this weekend and moving forward for sure.
All right, so on again, off again, now back on again, 4-star wide receiver Lex Cyrus from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Just out of the blue, he says, well, I visited Penn State. This weekend I'm going to South Carolina, and then I'm making my decision. So It's Penn State or South Carolina. I mean, how off was that? Did that catch you off guard? I mean, when I read that, it kind of hit me like, holy cow. I mean, honestly, Penn State, they got the home state advantage. How serious of a factor is South Carolina with Lex Cyrus?
Yeah, as you mentioned, he's one of these guys who he's going to be he told 24/7 Sports, Brian Doan, that it's either here or Penn State, here as in South Carolina. And he wants to make that decision, I think, next week. So I think just with that Penn State pool, I mean, he's a Harrisburg, Pennsylvania guy. So, I mean, close to home, you kind of wonder how much of a part that's playing in this. But I think it says something that he's coming to South Carolina, that there is some thought that he does want to kind of get to talk to Mike Furry and those guys a little bit more in depth this weekend. So we'll see what happens here this weekend.
Should be interesting. All right, so Sean Elliott, as a tight ends coach, got a chance to get on the board this weekend. Preston Douglas, 6'4", 220 from North Palm Beach, Florida. He's coming in. I mean, it seems like the Gamecocks have momentum with him coming into this official visit.
Yeah, a guy that was at the spring game kind of got on the radar of Sean Elliott and those guys coming out of North Palm Beach. 6'4", 220, so it's got pretty good size. I think with him, I think it's obviously all the official visits are big, but I think this one's going to be pretty big here because he also has one to NC State next weekend. And I think that's the only one that he has scheduled so far. So I think he hasn't set a commitment date, but I think, in the next few weeks we'll be hearing maybe some type of commitment date or a commitment from him. And I think this weekend with Sean Elliott, those guys, is going to be huge.
All right, so 3 other guys before we get to the big fish that are coming in this weekend. You have 2 committee guys, Brian Rowe, he's coming in, DeMarcus Leach, the safety from Abbeville, they're coming in. All right, it looks like, Zayden Walker is not going to team up with his brother, Jalewis Solomon. And so, for me, a really intriguing guy that's visiting South Carolina this weekend is Buford linebacker A.J. Holloway, 6'2", 225. He had said, a month or 2 ago he was going to visit Louisville and then South Carolina, and then he'd probably be ready to make his decision. He had a great visit to Louisville. I mean, let's face it, nobody has a bad official visit But for a Buford, Georgia kid, the allure and the pull of the SEC, Clayton White has the relationship here. How hard do you think South Carolina is pushing for A.J. Holloway, and how do you handicap his recruitment coming into this official visit? We lost your audio, Alex.
Sorry, you got me now. You got? Okay, sorry, I forgot I unmuted the mic. Coming off that Louisville official visit, he is a guy who I think Louisville leads, and he said so. And 24/7 Sports, Anna Adams has said so that Louisville leads. So it's obviously a big official visit for him. He was in here in the spring. I don't think he was at the spring game, but I know he was in for a spring practice. I think South Carolina is pushing here, and I think with this official visit, it's going to be having to kind of regain momentum a little bit here coming off that Louisville official visit, but we'll see here this weekend.
All right, so a couple guys I admit I don't really know a whole lot about is Christopher Hatfield, 6'3", 205 from Lincoln, Georgia. The big rangy guy could be a wide receiver, could be a safety. You know, what position does South Carolina like him as, and is he a guy that they are going to push for?
I think so, and I think they want him as a safety, or maybe kind of that defensive back athlete, but I can see safety just kind of at that size. With him, it's going to be kind of, 6'3", 205. He's got some other official visits with Toledo and West Virginia on the 21st. He's kind of one when I'm looking ahead to this weekend. I'm interested to hear what he says coming off the visit, just where they want to use him, how they want to use him, just kind of how much are they pushing here, because I think they are. But I'll be keeping a close eye on this one because I think he's an interesting prospect, one of the more interesting ones here this weekend.
All right, so there's a 6'3", 225-pound edge guy from Roswell, Georgia. I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I'm just going to let you. I know it's the first name is either Kobe or Cobby. He's got a hyphenated last name. I don't want to slaughter it. So, what do you know about this guy?
He's a guy. It was kind of maybe not a late ad, but he was a guy who kind of was a little bit later add to this official visit weekend. I think Sterling Lucas kind of identified him as a guy he wants to see more in person and kind of get a full evaluation of him. So we talk about all these edges that South Carolina has coming in. You know, I think it's hard to doubt Sterling Lucas and what he sees in edge guys because he knows exactly what he's looking for, and he's proven that. So I think one thing with him is just getting him in and seeing just kind of what the size is and how they want to use him here moving forward.
All right, so the big fish, 5-star edge, Isaiah Gibson, 6'4", 245 from Warner Robins, Georgia. He committed to Southern Cal, but the conventional wisdom says he's probably going to wind up somewhere in the SEC. Not expected to sign with Southern Cal. Everybody wants this guy. I mean, back-to-back weeks of having a 5-star defensive end on campus from out of state, that's pretty uncharted waters for South Carolina. I mean, I'd have to think they're probably a long shot here. And I'd say the same for Juan Gaston, the big offensive lineman from Atlanta. Westlake, it seems like he's going to Georgia. And then you got Kevin Wynn, who would be huge if South Carolina could get him, 6'2", 320, defensive tackle out of Greensboro, Georgia. But again, it seems like Georgia could be the school to beat. And so 3 big fish, your thoughts on all of these guys?
Yeah, on those first 2 guys you mentioned, I kind of agree that there's some work to do for South Carolina to get in those recruitments. I think with Isaiah Gibson, I mean, that guy can go anywhere in the country. And so, I mean, he's a highly rated guy. So I think it's a big official visit for them just to kind of build some momentum with him. Same thing with Gaston. I could see I think Georgia's probably the player there that everybody's thinking about. But Kevin Wynn's the one that's interesting because I think he's built a really strong relationship with Travian Robertson. You mentioned Georgia with him again, just like it seems like we're mentioning with all these recruits. But I think with him, that relationship he has, and he's kind of mentioned, I think I talked to him after the spring game, and he said, South Carolina's really high up there on my list because one of the things he mentioned was they have everything that I want outside of football. So, he's coming off that Georgia official visit. It sounds like Georgia's pushing. I mean, I think we know how many defensive linemen Georgia likes to take and seem to get every cycle. But I'm interested to see just how much the relationship with Travian Robertson's built with him plays in this recruitment.
So, I mean, either Georgia keeps signing them and then guys get tired of being third and fourth team on the depth chart, and maybe you get them out of the portal, or maybe you finally say, hey, look, they got all these guys. All our guys are leaving. You got a shot to come in and play immediately. I mean, it just seems like Georgia just oversigns. I mean, they're going to get Elijah Griffin. I mean, I don't know who else they're going to get, but, I mean, it just seems like they're in on every 4- and 5-star defensive lineman within a 300-mile radius of Athens.
Yeah, you kind of think that all these, some of these recruits would see just how many they've signed. And, but I think one of the big things with them is like they just produce defensive linemen into the NFL every year, first round, second round picks. I think that's just a huge lure for these guys to go and say, like, yeah, they're signing all these guys, but they're still producing and getting them to the NFL. So I think that's something here with Kevin Wynn and all these other defensive linemen South Carolina recruits Georgia against. It's kind of getting over that hump. But, I think South Carolina's – I'm interested with – Kevin Wynn's one of the more intriguing names this weekend because – seems like South Carolina has momentum, still some momentum there, coming off that Georgia visit. But it will be interesting to see where things stand with him.
I agree. All right, so I want to ask you just about two guys that are coming in on the 21st. The first one is a guy that I love on film, Donovan Darden from Havelock, North Carolina. Of course, that's the home of Corey Robinson and Pharaoh Cooper, and where my good friend Brad Lawing got his first coaching job out of college. It seems like the Gamecocks have been in a good place with him since making the offer and bringing him in for that last official visit weekend. He could be, again, an outside linebacker or an edge guy. I'm really interested in him. And then, another big-time guy, Bryce Davis, out of Grimsley High School in Greensboro, 6'3", 245, Georgia, and Clemson at the top for him. But Sterling Lucas, it seems like, has built a good relationship with him. Could South Carolina be a dark horse here?
I kind of think so. You kind of took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say I think Carolina could be a little bit of a dark horse here. He had that top three of Clemson, Duke, and Georgia, and is coming off a Clemson official visit. And then last night announced on Twitter that he was going to be coming to South Carolina the 21st. And he's committing on July 20th. So, I think kind of like we talked about earlier, it's not – I mean, he's coming in for a reason. Like, I think there's some interest here on both sides and definitely on his side. Now, how much can they get over that hump of not being in that top three and some of these other schools that have been there? We'll see. With Donovan Darden, he was a guy who had the spring game we kind of had an eye on because he came in the spring game without an offer and then left with an offer after talking to the coaches. And he's a guy kind of that I think Clayton White kind of identified as somebody that he likes in this class at that linebacker position. And with him, I think it's interesting that South Carolina right now is that last official visit because he's been going to Illinois this weekend, Pittsburgh this weekend. As you mentioned, 3-star guy will have Lock. South Carolina's got some little bit of pull there with some recent guys who've committed and come to South Carolina, Pharaoh Cooper, who thrived. So I think South Carolina can make some noise in that recruitment and maybe sitting near the top of that recruitment at the moment.
Yeah, I like him a lot. All right, so Alex, tell us what you got coming up on thebigspur.com, and are you anticipating any welcome homes between now and this coming weekend?
Yeah, so we got another big weekend this weekend. Got second session of Beamer Camp Friday, so we'll be out there covering that. Then, as we've been talking about, big official visit weekend. I guess you could see possibly a potential, maybe a guy or two committing, but just with some of these guys, like there's still some official visits that are left to take place. But kind of what I've been saying about this first weekend, just because there wasn't any commitments doesn't mean it wasn't a successful weekend for them, because I think either they kind of got themselves into the game with guys or either kind of grew their lead with guys. I think that could be kind of the case this weekend with some of these guys too.
I mean, a lot of big boy recruiting battles going on. You got to put on your big boy pants when you're lining up against Georgia and North Carolina kids and Southern Cal commitments and 5-star guys. So it's going to be interesting. Alex, thanks for being with us. We'll look forward to reading all your stuff on the Big Spur. I think you knocked it out of the park, and hopefully we can get you back on, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. I enjoyed it.
All right. That is the Big Spurs, Alex Jones. Alex takes care, and we'll talk to you later. All right. So if you enjoy listening to this free Wednesday show, which of course is streaming on YouTube, on Spotify, it'll be up, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like more of this every single day, I encourage you to join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual VIP subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every single day, Monday through Friday, and listen to great guests like Alex Jones, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from the Big Spur, Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, Jordan Kay and Peyton Titus from Go Gamecocks in the State. Michael W. Bratton is going to be back on the pod soon, as well as 24/7 National College Football analyst Brad Crawford. Got to check in with my good friend Langston Moore and many, many other guests. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to our weekly live Zoom call. Just went back to Tuesday nights. That's the Garnet and Black Town Hall. It's like going down to your favorite sports bar and hanging out with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. That lasts for about an hour. We record it if you can't listen live. We put it up after the show. Then we have an unrecorded overtime segment. That's where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. So again, it's like going down to your local pub, hanging out with your favorite Gamecocks and friends, talking men's and women's basketball, football, recruiting, baseball, angst and consternation, optimism, bitching, moaning, complaining, whatever. It's interactive. Everybody gets a voice and gets their say. So, in addition to all of that, during football season, you get probably my most popular podcast, which is The Morning After. That drops on Sunday morning, and that is a weekend review of Gamecock, SEC, and National College football, and more VIP perks are in the works. So just follow me on Twitter at KAllsep. That's KALLSEP, or follow the show at Gamecock Pod. Go to the top of the home page, click the link. It's easy to sign up. You can sign up for a week free. Jump in the town hall. If you sign up now, you get almost 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription, and nobody does a better job of talking Gamecock women's basketball than yours truly right here. All right, back to the show. All right, let's get to my interview with Mike Uva, where we'll talk about our beloved Boston Celtics. We'll talk Gamecock women's basketball, little men's basketball, and we'll dive into the football search. So here is my interview from earlier this morning with Mike Uva. Before I get to that, though, in the chat box, Craig is like, how can we only have one official visit running back? Does Blackwell even want to be here? Well, I think he's being picky. And I do know that there are some other things in the works. My favorite running back that South Carolina's involved with that I've watched on film, Jaden Franklin. He's coming out soon for an unofficial visit. He's coming to camp in late July in the cookout. And I think they want to bring him in for an official visit during the season, but that doesn't mean he won't already be committed by then. He's 5'11 and a half, 215. He ran 4.47 at Texas Junior Day camp. And he's an impressive athlete. There's the transfer portal, and other than Rocket Sanders, Oscar Attaway has another year. Jawan Howell has 3 years of eligibility. Braswell has 3 more years of eligibility. And you have Matthew Fuller as well. So I think he's just being picky. I think, there's a couple guys in Central Florida he likes. I think we could see both of those guys. One of them's a high school quarterback, but he's recruiting him as a running back. He's 6 foot 205. And there's another guy who transferred in to that school in Clearwater that is also a running back. And so I don't think all is necessarily lost at the running back position. I just think he's being picky because you're probably only going to take 1, maybe 2 guys. You want to make sure those are going to be the right guys. Overton's a smaller back. Jaden Franklin is a prototypical SEC back. We're just going to have to see how it shakes out. Plus, you never know, somebody at Alabama or Florida or Georgia could get tired of being third on the depth chart and say, hey, I think I can start at South Carolina. I'm rolling in. So Craig says I've talked him off the ledge. So that's good. On the defensive lineman, if South Carolina can beat Georgia on Kevin Wynn, I think that is a huge get for Travian Robertson. I do think South Carolina is in good shape for Bryce Jenkins. I think that's right. Hopefully I just did. Yeah, Bryce Jenkins. And then you've got Eric Thomas from also the Lehigh Acres, Florida, which is outside of Tampa. He's 6'5", 325. He's coming in on that June 21st. I think, they'd love to add the JUCO that was committed. And then I think the transfer portal, they're going to have to get some guys. I mean, look, Lavoisier Carroll could have helped if he could have stayed healthy. Unfortunately for him, he is stricken with sickle cell, and that ended his playing days. I mean, Rashad Amos, that guy, that just tells you how incompetent the former guy was. I'm just going to start mentioning him the same way as the former guy that was the offensive coordinator. Couldn't keep him. He goes to Miami of Ohio. Then he's going to Mississippi State. Then he's going to Colorado. Now he's going to Ole Miss. Certainly he could have helped. But look, Rocket Sanders, nobody's beating that guy out. Arguably, South Carolina, they got to get that offensive line fixed because you probably have the best running back in all of college football, and you have the guy that is the closest guy to resembling George Rogers in stature, 6'2", 225, 4'4", legit speed when he's healthy. I mean, you got to get that offensive line right for Rocket Sanders, who he is in my opinion, the premier running back in the country. People can talk about, the dude that his brother played at Clemson that left Florida and went to Georgia, but that guy, he ain't Rocket Sanders. All right, so after my interview with Mike Uva, I'll have a little bit of women's basketball recruiting to end the show. And so let's go to my interview with Mike Uva. Just bear with me for about 5 seconds and he'll pop on. And we welcome in to Gamecock Pod Live our good friend Mike Uva, two-time Emmy award-winning sportscaster, now heading it up at Gamecock Central. Mike, we sit here today on the precipice of greatness. Banner 8, that we are on the eve of the beginning of Banner 18 for the Boston Celtics. All my friends here in Texas are going to be crying when Kyrie and Luka, who probably eats a sub in between every quarter. I think the Celtics are going to take them down.
They should. If they don't, it'll be one of the biggest collapse in NBA Finals history. There's never been a 5 seed to win the NBA Finals. So as far as what the odd makers are saying, as far as what the eye test has shown, at least during the regular season, because Porzingis will be back in the finals. He spoke to the media earlier this week, and he said that he'll be good to go. There's no reason why they don't win this. And if they do, oh, goodness. I mean, I know no one's ever going to feel bad for just a Boston sports fan just because of the number of championships, especially in my lifetime. But there's also been a lot of heartbreak. I think back. Honestly, if they lost the finals, I'd put it right up there with the 07 Patriots, simply because you dominate the year in which they did, and it wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't exciting, but like you would just assume it. Like I was watching the playoffs and Indiana made it interesting, but even in those 3 games where the Pacers could have won, not once did I say, oh man, if they lost one of these games or lost 2 of these games, am I worried about the Celtics losing the series? So kind of like the 07 Patriots, who put up incredible numbers that season, 16-0 regular season. You expected them to win it all, and they didn't. Giants pulled off the upset in the Super Bowl. So I hope that's not the case. I hope we're not talking about Dallas the same way. But yeah, I'm excited, Keith. I'm going to be back in Boston this weekend. The girlfriend who I took to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals last year, it was her first NBA game. That's when Tatum rolled his ankle the first 10 seconds, and Jaylen Brown forgot how to dribble. Well, he remembered how to dribble. He just decided to dribble off his foot all the time. I'm not bringing her anywhere close to that arena. I'm doing my job by not letting her in the building. All jokes aside, we'll probably go to a local dive bar with some college buddies, watch the game on Sunday. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm very excited. It's a very special time right now in the city of Boston. So hopefully they'll get it done.
I think Porzingis is the key This kind of reminds me of the 2009 Boston Celtics after they won the championship, and then Kevin Garnett got injured, and he could not recover in time. This is different, though, as Porzingis. He should be well rested. I think
the way
he's
it
the
is now. And Keith, the way it is now, too, I mean, without going back and looking at the schedule, granted, two things. One, they've had 10 days off. When it's all said and done before they get back onto the court tomorrow night, it'd be 10 days. But on top of that, the way the NBA spreads out this thing, I mean, my goodness, I'm going to feel like an old man. Back in my day, we would actually turn around and play, a day or two. So it's pros and cons with it. But as a Celtics fan, you definitely will take as much time off and rest as possible, as long as it doesn't turn into rust come game time.
No doubt. So give me your prediction, then I'll make mine, and then we're going to talk about the Gamecocks.
What I want to see is Celtics in 5, because I want to see Boston win it on their home court like they did in 2007. But I could see this one going 6, simply because what scares me is, unlike Indiana, I don't think Dallas is going to piss down their legs if there's a situation with a minute left and they're in some of those similar situations, just because they have the veteran players who have proven it. Luke is phenomenal. As much as Kyrie gets under the skin of Boston Celtics fans, and rightfully so, he's a phenomenal player. He is incredible with the ball. To quote Danny Age, who I was listening to a podcast recently, he's a wizard with the way he handles the ball. His ball, it's unbelievable. So I hope that's not the case. I hope Jason Kidd continues to be the Jason Kidd of when he was coaching the Nets, and not this playoff run that he's been on, because he's been on a heater. But we'll see. Both coaches kind of scare me. I like Joe Mazzulla, the person. I'm starting to really gravitate towards him, because he just gives you that I don't give a crap mentality. But man, both coaches kind of scare me. So bottom line, this analytical crap, right? Just fire up, just make your 3 Celtics. And if you're not, I'm going to sound like a youth basketball coach. Just take a couple of steps in. A 2-point, it's okay. Just get the confidence going. I'm nervous, Keith. I'm not going to lie, because I know it's not going to be as a cakewalk as it's been for the Celtics the first 3 series of the playoffs.
I really think it's going to go 7. I got Celtics in 7.
I don't know if my heart could do a 7-game series with all the Bruins stuff in it. So I can't do it. Keith, I'm still getting over the game 7s from last year for the Celtics. Not good for my health if it goes 7 games.
I'd like to see it in 5 as well, but it may very well, depending on Porzingis' health. And Dallas has been really hot. Hopefully the time off cooled them down, and the rest was really good for Boston. They need to come out and take a commanding 2-0 lead, have a chance to go to Dallas and get that split, and then come back home. But Luka Doncic looks like the best player in the league.
He's incredible. That game too, Keith. I mean, it goes without saying the Celtics need to. They need to take care of business. Settle for the series on your home court. But game 2 scares me, simply because outside of this last series, they have really struggled in these game 2s. And that hurt me a little bit, because especially at this time of the year, if you're able to steal one on the road, it can change the series. So yeah, I don't want this thing going back to Dallas 1-1. Take care of business on your home court, but obviously first things first, take care of business tomorrow night, and then Friday, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about it Saturday. We'll figure out, all right, this is who the Mavericks are. Make your adjustments. And
no doubt. All right, so let's talk about somebody that's already won some championships, and that's Dawn Staley. It appears the roster is complete now. They will have 13 scholarship players. Super senior 6'5" center Sakima Walker announced yesterday she will use her final year of eligibility. She was a National Junior College Player of the Year 2 years ago. I think it was a tough adjustment because of playing behind Cardoso, being new into the program. But I think this team likes her, the coaching staff, because she is a calming influence in the locker room. She's a veteran presence and a hard worker that she's just happy to be there. And so they get her back as a depth piece and as a veteran. And then they add one of the most elite players in the transfer portal, 6'4" Arkansas forward Miriam Dowda, a former McDonald's All-American. All she did was lead Arkansas in field goal percentage, rebounding, and blocked shots. She blocked 10 shots in a game. That was the most in an SEC game, by the way. Not against Little Rock Community College in the exhibition, but against Alabama. And that's just another proven SEC starter to add to a championship roster that only lost one player. And so you add Dowda to this team. You add the number 3 recruiting class in the country with Joyce Edwards. This is just according to ESPN, which is not the end-all, be-all, okay? Most services had Joyce Edwards as the number 1 player in the country, and she proved it in every all-star game she was in. You got the number 2 point guard in the country, Madison McDaniel from Bishop McNamara in Baltimore, and 6'6" Adele Tack, who enrolled early because of the dislocated knee injury. She's been with the team. And then, my God, 4 starters and every top reserve on the team that went 38-0 is back. Is this an embarrassment of riches or what on this roster? Mike, we've lost your volume.
Talking about Walker, and you mentioned it with that veteran presence, looking at some of the things that some of the players have said over the last couple months, they view her to be the mom in the room. I mean, being able to have that piece can really help you from a glue standpoint. And don't get me wrong, there are talented players in that room, and I think being able to go through what they went through this last season, it forces a lot of those younger players to have to grow up. But at the same time, too, as we all know on any level, any sport, being able to have just that calming voice can certainly help out. And, this is a team that we know heading into this next season, if you felt like that target was on their back to begin with, heading into last year, my goodness, because as we've talked about, Keith, right? Last year, they weren't supposed to do that. It was supposed to be a quote-unquote rebuild year. Make it to the Sweet 16, make it to the Elite 8. Wow, that would be incredible. That would be incredible after all you lost the previous season. And what do? They make history by being one of a handful of teams that have ever gone undefeated in a season and win a national championship. This was the season. This was the year that they're supposed to make a push. So add in obviously an incredibly talented recruiting class. Donna's done a phenomenal job, as we all know, over the last couple of years. It goes without saying. I think the big thing is not to take it for granted in the sense of, okay, she's Dawn Staley. South Carolina is the number 1 program. Everyone wants to play here. in this era of NIL, I'm never just going to take things for granted. I'm never just going to assume that someone's status, that someone, some team that has the number one attendance consistently the last couple of years, the fact that they're obviously the bar, right? They are the bar when it comes to college basketball. You can't just assume anything, because as soon as you do that, guess what happens? Some of those top players are going to go elsewhere. So, look, obviously NIL still plays a big part, and they're getting some help through Garnet Trust. They're getting help throughout the community. There's no question about that. But at the end of the day, we all know why these players are coming to South Carolina. They want to be coached by the best. They want to be coached by someone who understands what it's like to play at that next level. And we've seen that over the last couple of years with the number of Gamecocks in the WNBA. And obviously a lot of them are having a lot of success right now, including Asia Wilson.
No doubt about it. I mean, Raven Johnson, Tahina Powell, Breezy Hall, Chloe Kitts, they return as starters. Malaysia Fulwiley, a generational talent. I mean, how do you keep her out of the lineup? How do you keep Tessa Johnson out of the lineup? She was the leading scorer in the game that sent you to the Final Four and the game that won you the national championship. You add the best player in the country. You return Sanaya Fagan, who really, I thought, played her best basketball in this NCAA tournament. Ashlyn Swatkins, she's probably stepping into that starting lineup. An explosive athlete who's had a dunk in each of her 2 seasons at South Carolina. Walker's back. You add Mariam Dowda, Adele Tack, 6'6", who's going to be healthy, who's going to have the body by Benetti, Molly Benetti, the strength coach, the rehab they're doing with her. She should be 100% this month and ready to roll. I mean, it's embarrassing, but it's certainly, I think South Carolina is the envy of the nation when it comes to women's basketball. All right, so before we get into what everybody wants to talk about, which is who's going to be the next men's golf coach at South Carolina, we got to talk about the quarter zip, Lamont Paris. He lost one of his top assistant coaches, Tim Buckley, goes with Wes Miller to Cincinnati. So he has his first vacancy coming off a season where they finished tied for second in the SEC, where they made the NCAA tournament, where they were ranked in the top 10. I think he's in a much better position to go out and make a hire than he was 2 years ago when he took this job. So there's that, and there's still one roster spot that they have available. That was created when Trent Noah was released from his letter of intent and signed with New Kentucky coach Mark Pope. And then it looked like Jamie Vinson, 6'11", from here in Austin, was going to be a slam dunk. And then my man Rodney Terry said, not so fast. You got Cam Smith, your hometown guy. I think I'm going to go get my hometown guy. Yesterday, Texas signed Jamie Vinson. I think this team needs another guard. And it doesn't really matter if it's a younger player or an older player, because of the transfer portal. Yeah, it really doesn't matter. If you can get a wing, if you can get another guard, I think you at this point, you take the best player available to help your team, because every basketball roster now, particularly on the men's side, it's mostly going to be a year-to-year build.
Which is why, Keith, I don't entirely disagree with what you're saying, personally, I wouldn't mind them going after a player in the portal first. And again, that's just what I would like to see. Now, if they were to end up with a high school player, a talented one that would make sense for the team, absolutely. I'm not going to get upset about that. But to your point, which is just that, you don't know what the roster is going to look like year after year after year. You can't assume anything. We're talking about you can't assume anything when it comes to recruiting for women's basketball. You can't assume anything for any sport, right? So, look, what South Carolina was able to do last year and some of the players that they lost, I'd love to just see competition at certain positions to really be able to get the best out of players. Because if someone's not happy with their role, and obviously you bring in a transfer player that only has a year of eligibility left, that goes without saying. But if someone's not happy with their role and they want to leave, you're not going to be able to keep everyone happy. And it's not just about money at that point. There's only so many players you can play at one time. So I think going back to what you initially said with Tim Buckley, he did some great things here. Getting to know him away from the court, great guy, played a big role in what South Carolina was able to do from a recruiting standpoint. And that's part of it too, right? When you have success, there's going to be other schools that are going to come knocking. You would like to see if guys leave, it's for head coaching jobs. It's part of it. But at the same time, too, it could be anything. It could be more money. It could be a higher rank on the bench somewhere. So it comes with it. But as you also added, and I agree with you, the fact that South Carolina was able to have the type of success they had last season, if you're a coach out there, it's not just, all right, I'm trying to get an opportunity to coach a Power 5 or whatever you want to call it now. I mean, obviously we look at the Big East, but RIP Pac-12. You don't know. You don't know what you would have got if you came to South Carolina. Now you do. Now you do. Now you have a better idea. And Lamont has certainly elevated his name in the game, especially at this level after doing what he was able to do a couple seasons ago at Chattanooga.
No doubt about it. 26-8, 13-5 in the SEC. You won a tournament game. So you went 14-6 counting the SEC tournament. My two guys I'm invested in is my main man, Charlton Young, who was at FSU. He was at Auburn with Cliff Ellis, a great recruiter, went to Missouri with Dennis Gates. He's phenomenal. Steve Smith, who left Clemson and went to Florida State. I just don't know how much longer my man at Florida State's going to keep coaching. He's in his 70s right now. That could make a lot of sense. But, there's a lot of guys that we don't know about that Lamont Paris has relationships with. So it certainly will be interesting where they go for the hire and what they do with the roster spot. All right, so all the football players that are going to be on this team are on campus now, except for, I think, Jerome Simmons will be in mid-June. Mm-hmm. You just added Jalewis Solomon, an elite corner, an elite tight end, and Michael Smith, another running back in Matthew Fuller, and 2 transfer portal wide receivers. You're coming off your first official visit weekend. Mike, what are your takeaways? No welcome homes, but Jaquel Hallman from Blackville Hilda is a guy they didn't really know about. They wanted to have him at camp. He was at that camp. He measured 6'1.5", 198, 4.43 in the 40, 4.28 in the shuttle. And a guy that looks like he's really at a 1A school, not obviously they don't have the strength program that Burns or Dutch Fork or Somerville has, but a tremendous athlete. And then I think you got to love coming out of the weekend, the top two guys you had on campus, 5-star defensive end Jared Smith and offensive tackle Jalen Gilchrist. I think the leaders were both of those guys as well. That's big boy recruiting, but you have to like where you are with two of the top players in the country at their position from out of state.
Yeah, no question. And you mentioned Jared Smith. His host was Dylan Stewart, and for the offensive lineman, Cam Pringle hosted him. And I could tell you from talking to a lot of the players, Cam Pringle is a pretty damn good host. He's a popular guy. He knows how to treat the guys right. So we'll see. We'll see how some of these things pan out. I've said this before, and I try to remind people, if you look back over the last couple of years with recruiting, it really starts to crank up in June and July for Beamer when it comes to recruiting. Last year, from a July standpoint, I think people expected a little bit more, but the point being is the summer is really when it's been picking up. And I think there's a couple reasons why that is the case, and not just at South Carolina, but throughout college football. I truly believe now with the transfer portal that coaches are encouraging players more than ever to commit earlier, right? Even if it's a verbal commitment, to commit earlier so that, number one, from a coaching standpoint, it makes it easier for you because you're trying to put your board together. You're trying to figure out, all right, class of 2025, class of 2026, whatever the case may be. And you're letting those recruits know, hey, look, we want you here. And depending on, obviously, their status, if you have a high 4-star, if you have a 5-star, you might be a little bit more patient, right? I mean, I'm not sitting here saying that, oh, man, if Dylan Stewart wanted to drag his feet, or perfect example, Nick Harbor a couple of years ago. You know what, Nick? You're waiting until the second signing day. We might not have a spot for you. No, obviously, there's exceptions. There's outliers. But the majority of players, it feels like, commit earlier because they also know that in this world of college football, spots are valuable. Spots are few, it feels like, depending on, obviously, your status. The number of players still in the transfer portal, my goodness, on all levels. I think it's like over 2,000 on all levels if you go through D2, D3 as well. So I say that to also further prove just how critical it is for players to make sure that they lock their spots up, because guess what? If you drag your feet and you're not seen as being one of those elite players, bus is going to leave, son. Bus is going to leave, and they're going to pick someone up at the next stop.
Yep, another elite group set to come in this weekend as well. All right, so the Mark Kingston era came to an end after a poor showing in the Raleigh Regional. Quite frankly, if it hadn't been for a pitcher who must have had a brain fart and said, hey, call Messina. Yeah, let me see if I can just throw him a first pitch fastball. You don't win that game. I mean, even the big LSU reliever found that out in the SEC tournament when Messina mashed one 440 feet on a first pitch fastball in Hoover. So Mark Kingston is out. Mike Current is out. Holcomb still employed. Matt Williams and Monty Lee is the interim head coach. And so in my lifetime, every Gamecock baseball coach until the last two has taken South Carolina to Omaha multiple times. The late, great Bobby Richardson, who was a New York Yankee. I know you're a Red Sox. He took South Carolina twice. They finished national runner-up. June Raines was his predecessor. He took the Gamecocks to College World Series. Obviously, Ray Tanner took the Gamecocks to College World Series many times. Played for it 4 times, won it twice, played for it the last 3 years of his career, won back-to-back championships in 10 and 11, lost to a red-hot Arizona team. And now Chad Holbrook, he didn't make it, and Mark Kingston didn't make it. From all accounts, it appears like Cliff Godwin from East Carolina, and we talked about the disparity that's coming. I hope he's smart enough to see the writing on the wall, because 3 years from now, East Carolina is going to be in the group of 5. They're not going to be relevant in college sports. After him, though, it kind of gets dicey. I mean, I don't know if Cliff Godwin turns it down, who's in between him and Monty Lee, but I know Monty Lee's a candidate. A lot of Gamecock fans may not like to hear that. Your thoughts on the head coaching opening and the sense of urgency that's out there because of the transfer portal on making a hire? And quite frankly, all the names, Cliff Godwin, Chris Lamonis, Dan McDonald, Josh Elander, the assistant at Tennessee, Chris Pollard at Duke, they're all available for interviews right now. You know, Kevin O'Sullivan's the only guy who's not, and not many people that I've talked to seem to think he will be a big factor this time. He would be my personal choice, but that's just me. If you can't get Cliff Godwin, and so as we wrap it up here, your thoughts on the baseball search and what kind of hire South Carolina needs to make to move forward?
Well, I think if you're interested in Godwin, now's the time to go after him. And I say that because I think he sees the writing on the wall. We talk about just the changes that are coming to college athletics, with schools now going to be able to pay student athletes. So I think it's going to make things even that much more challenging for a school like ECU. You know, how does that impact things? Now, obviously, there's been reports in the past that the only way he'd leave there would be for his quote-unquote dream job, which would be Ole Miss. And could that possibly open next year? It could, but at the same time, too, that's not a given. So if he's looking at the situation saying, all right, you know, that might be where I'd love to be, but at the same time, too, I know that I might have to make a move, and if the move's not this year, it's next year. Now what? So I bring that up first and foremost. The other thing, too, and you mentioned a lot of those names, Keith, if South Carolina is interested in going after some of the coaches who just finished up their season, they're in a much different spot this go around in comparison to where things were following the Chad Holbrook era. And what I mean by that is all the guys, I say all, the majority of those coaches who they are interested in targeting, at least at the top of their list, they're all done. Their seasons are over. A couple of years back, you're waiting a little bit. And we've seen this in other sports. We've seen it in basketball, worked out for them. But if you put all your eggs in one basket, or the first two guys, and you're kind of being, handcuffed in a way and hold hostage, you're going to not be able to get those guys. You're not going to be able to get potentially even your number 3 or number 4 guy, because you're focusing so much on 1 and 2. And they get back to you and they say, look, no. So to me, I think the interesting thing is this, Keith, and I've had conversations with people close to the program and the administration, just talking to people. I think the tough part is this. What are the standards at South Carolina right now? And we were talking about the Celtics, and I think this is a conversation that Gamecock fans and the administration as well, including Ray, have to be realistic with themselves. To kind of throw Rick Pitino in there when he was coaching the Celtics. Ray Tanner's not walking through those doors, fans. This isn't 2010. This isn't 2011. You're not a top 5 program anymore. You're not a top 10. Shoot, you might not even be a top 20, at least right now. That's not to say you can't climb back up, but I think we have to understand what the standards are right now. And certainly that doesn't mean that Kingston should have been able to stay a year or two, because at some point, yeah, you have to be realistic with yourself. Is this the guy that's going to take you over that hump? I thought he did some good things, but guess what? At a school like South Carolina, good's not going to cut it. So whoever you bring in, I just hope, number one, I think they will, but I also hope the fan base understands what are the expectations right now. It can't be, going to Omaha. Don't get me wrong. They should get back to Omaha at some point. But unlike the days when Bobby Richardson was here, I'm going to piss off so many people, but I don't care. Unlike the days like Bobby Richardson, and even when Reigns was here for, I'd say, half of his career, I looked this up. In the 33 seasons, 33, I think it's been 33 full seasons. Well, 32 if you take away the COVID year. But in the 33 seasons since South Carolina has joined the SEC, outside of the 13 years when Ray Tanner was here, and obviously we know what happened there and how talented it is. So you do the math, that's 20 years. Only eight seasons USC has had a winning record in conference play. Why do I bring that up? I bring that up because the gauntlet now in comparison to what it used to be outside of Ray, he's the outlier, it's much tougher now. And it's only going to get tougher. So that doesn't mean to, wave your white flag, but I just further proving that it's tougher now. The path to get to Omaha is even tougher now. I would argue, as much as I love SEC football, and I think it's the toughest freaking conference in the country when it comes to it, I think going through SEC baseball play is even tougher than football. So whoever comes in here, I just hope the coach understands that being a good coach, because again, I think Kingston's a good coach. You don't get to this level if you're not a good coach. But good is not going to cut it at South Carolina. But again, you're not going to get Ray Tanner coming through the door. So I don't know. I know I kind of went in 8 different directions, Keith, but a lot of this stuff I've just been thinking about the last couple of days, and I hope they bring someone that can get this program at least heading in a direction where they're competing at the top of the conference each year, that they're appearing more in super regionals, because I understand how passionate this fan base is about baseball, but I just don't want it to be one of those things that we're sitting there looking at it like the friggin' like the Cowboy fans, like, back in '95, it's just like, oh my God, Jimmy Johnson's not coaching the team. Oh my God, the Celtics, they friggin' haven't really doing anything in my life. Patient and understand that it's not friggin' 2011 anymore. It's not 2010. That's all I have to say. That's my rant.
All right, so I'll have a short retort and then we'll wrap it up, because I know you got places to be, and I know you got to go see a horse about a man. But I think there are some things about Mark Kingston that he did not, one, ingratiate himself into the community. Virtually
I don't disagree with that.
Virtually,
I don't disagree with that.
As critical as NIL is, not going out there and patting backs and shaking hands and getting to know boosters. My friend John Whittle made this point. It got so bad with the fans that you were hosting top 5 teams in the country in Arkansas and Kentucky, and then Georgia comes in, who wound up being a top 8 national seed. And normally you're packing that place out. You're playing for super regional host in those first 2 series, and it's half full. And so I just don't think Kingston's personality allowed him to be a Shane Beamer, a Dawn Staley, who organically built support through community outreach. And I think the next guy has to be that kind of guy, which will make it easier in the age of name, image, and likeness money and the transfer portal to be able to get players. And you also have to have somebody that's even keel with the players. You can't be unpredictable. Like, oh God, what mood is coach in today? You can't. Is he going to even acknowledge me today? Or is he going to act like I'm his best friend today, and then tomorrow he's not even going to know who I am? You can't have that. And it's going to be interesting. I don't know. I think Monty Lee's an excellent coach. I think Chris Pollard's an excellent coach. I don't think from the people I've heard from that they're going to go the assistant coach route. They want a more established guy. Dan McDonald from Louisville, 5 times in Omaha. But since COVID, he's not adapted to name, image, and likeness in the portal. They've missed the tournament 3 of the last 4 years. Did he forget how to coach? No. But you can't bring in a guy that's not going to embrace name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal. Now, if you put together a staff for him and he's able to do that, to me, that could be a grand slam hire. Maybe Chris Lamont it's too much pressure at Mississippi State. He wants to come back to where he went to school at the Citadel and coach. Maybe you can get Cliff Godwin. I don't know. But again, all these guys are available, and I think by the beginning of next week, this search ought to become crystal clear on which direction it's going.
No, I agree, Keith. And one thing I do want to add, when you look at Monty Lee, if Monty Lee were to be the next head coach of South Carolina, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm seeing it a lot on social media. I'm seeing it on the message boards. And I'm not saying, necessarily he will or he won't. But if he were to be the head coach of South Carolina, one thing it seems like fans are concerned about, or they keep bringing up, he failed at Clemson. He had more success at Clemson than Kingston had here, just to throw that out. I think the winning percentage was another, I don't know, I have to pull it up in front of me, but he had about another 20, 30 wins. The other thing, too, I want to bring up.
Couldn't get out of his own regional, though, 3 times.
That's something that Clemson has struggled with, though. That's true. And I think that's the big thing. That, don't get me wrong, because when you look at resumes, you try to, from a metric standpoint, I mean, shoot, we can make that argument, Keith, and this isn't, a shot at you because I think you understand, but the fans are like, well, he couldn't get out of a regional at Clemson. Well, he somehow took frigging the College of Charleston out, and that's the reason why he got the head coaching job at Clemson, because he reached supers, at College of Charleston, So I think the interesting thing, and I know it's not apples to oranges, if we're going to compare a coach and just say, compare him based on, okay, this is what he did at the previous spot, and I'm not saying it basically say, okay, he's a good coach or a bad coach, he won't go. Nick Saban, for the majority, outside of his, final year at Michigan State, he was awful. I mean, he was an average coach at Michigan State. If that's the case, if we're just, Nick Saban, I mean, he only had 2 winning seasons outside of you know what? Shouldn't bring him to LSU. If LSU doesn't happen, guess what? He doesn't get the job at Alabama. He doesn't go down as one of the greatest coaches of all time. So I'm not saying Monty Lee's going to be the equivalent of Nick Saban in college baseball, but the whole point is we could be looking at Monty Lee totally different. It might not be at South Carolina. Maybe he goes somewhere else. If he's able to do what he was able to do at Clemson, and what I mean by that is get you to the tournament, and they get over the hump a couple times, guess what? You're looking at a guy that during his, 6 years there? 6 full seasons, because he had the COVID year in there. 6 full seasons. They made it to the tournament all but 2 years. So if they're able to get over the hump a couple times, that would be better than what happened with Kingston. That'd be better. But obviously that's a lot of coulda, shoulda, wouldas and all that. But I guess my whole point is, and especially we already know the players love him, the recruits love him. if you don't bring Monty in and you bring another coach in, could you lose some players? Absolutely. If you bring Monty, could you lose some players still? Absolutely. I mean, it's part of it with the transfer portal now. So I wouldn't say I would be held hostage by recruits to make that decision. Obviously, if I'm Ray Tanner and I'm the administration, I'm looking Chance Miller, I'm looking at that saying, okay, that's something I'm keeping in the back of my mind. But again, the reason I'm bringing this up is because there's just been a lot of conversation about Monty Lee from this fan base, and I get it. I don't think it would be one of those situations where you bring Muschamp in. It's like, oh, Muschamp he failed as a coach at Florida. Why are we bringing him in? I don't think it's apples to apples. And you also have to remember, people know this already, but it's worth just mentioning again. Ray Tanner understands the scrutiny he has received from the hires. And yes, Chad Holbrook was the coach that came in after him. To me, regardless of who you brought in after Ray, it was going to likely end the way that it did. Simply because you're replacing a legend. You're replacing a legend. And if you go throughout all of sports, not just college baseball, it is very difficult to replace the legend. So I think, if anything, Ray understands that he trusts Monty. And if Monty's the guy, what that tells me is Ray is confidence that, okay, I understand what he's capable of doing. The situation where we're in right now, he can be the guy that can fix it. Holbrook, and I love Chad Holbrook, and I thought he did the best that he could based on the situation. He was in a situation where I feel like he was going to not have the success that was going to keep him around simply because the bar was set so damn high by the guy that was previously there. But I don't know, Keith. I'm interested to see how this thing goes, but I agree with you. This thing should be wrapping up in the next couple of days. I think I'd be shocked if we're sitting here a week from now and there's not a decision yet. I think we'll know potentially over the weekend, but it could be at the beginning of next week from some of the things I was told yesterday.
I completely agree. Mike, I can't thank you enough for jumping on with us. Safe travels this weekend. Go Celtics. And hopefully next time we catch up, we're celebrating Banner 18. And be well, my friend. And we can't wait to see what happens with this search. I can't wait to see what happens starting tomorrow night with the Celtics. So safe travels, good luck, and God bless. And we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Appreciate it, Keith. And hopefully Emmy number 3. We'll see what happens on Saturday. We'll see what happens.
I'm pulling hard for you. Number 3. All right, that was my interview with Mike Uva. So, again, I don't know who the baseball coach is going to be. It may be Godwin. It may be Dan McDonald. It may be Monty Lee. But I don't think Monty Lee is Will Muschamp. It may be Chris Pollard at Duke. It may be Walter at Wake Forest. It may be somebody we're not even talking about. But I do think it will be wrapped up sooner rather than later. All right, so a little women's basketball recruiting to end the show. Here's my yard guys right outside my window. So we mentioned off the top, Gamecocks made the top 6 for the number 3 player in the class of 2025, Jasmine Jazzy Davidson out of Oregon. South Carolina is also in the mix for the number 1 player in the country in this class, Aaliyah Chavez, who is in Lubbock, Texas. South Carolina, Texas Tech, Arizona, Texas, Tennessee, Ohio State, Oklahoma, LSU, all the usual suspects. Don't count out Dawn Staley. Davidson, I think, is probably the most elite offensive player in the class. We'll be interested to see. She may take her recruitment to next spring and not sign early. Aaliyah Crump is a 6'1" guard out of Shakopee, Minnesota. She succeeded Tessa Johnson as the Minnesota Gatorade Player of the Year. She is ranked as the number 4 player in the country. And so you do have that Minnesota connection there. Divine Barrage, who is a 5'11" guard from Davenport, Iowa. Prior to Lisa Bluter retiring at Iowa, I think she was probably a lock for the Hawkeyes. Her high school teammate is already committed to Iowa. South Carolina was late to the party. They did not offer her until February. She's the number 5 player in the country. And then the number 7 player in the country is Zakiah Johnson, a 6-foot guard from Shelbyville, Kentucky. Again, all the usual suspects involved. South Carolina will lose a number of players off the roster this year. So I would expect Dawn Staley and staff to be active on the trail this summer and then into the fall with official visits. And so that will be a wrap. Special thanks to Alex Jones from the Big Spur, who absolutely killed it today, and to my good friend Mike Uva. So until next week, go Gamecocks and God bless. For everybody, I'll be back tomorrow on Gamecock Pod Daily. So appreciate everybody in the chat box, Craig and Jay Diaz in particularly. Yeah, I mean, Dawn and Lamont, they don't seem to have a problem recruiting to South Carolina. Basketball is a different animal than football. We'll see what happens with the Summer of Shane. Another big weekend coming up this weekend. All right, this is Keith Alsep signing off for Gamecock Pod Live, episode number 1500. Thanks to the almost 100 of you who watched live. And this will go up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts. So until tomorrow, Keith Alsep saying, go Gamecocks. I'm out of here.